Hello and welcome back to Good CEOs, episode 6. Today I'm joined by Leland Maschmeyer, the co-founder of Collins. Now, when you think of design, you think of Leland. He has rebranded Instagram. He has rebranded a campaign for Al Gore. He has built an incredible design transformation agency and then left and had a hiatus, joined Chobani, a yogurt brand, took them from being $1 million yogurt brand to $1 billion yogurt brand. This is the man that brings value with design, with a capital D. Okay, so I invited Leland on today, to speak about, yes, branding and design, but we evolved the conversation to speak about what brands are doing in 2026. What is a K-shaped economy? I hear you all screaming at me. And why does that matter to you as someone, a potential CEO or growing CEO in the creative economy? If you are running a creative business, if you're interested in how to price your services and your products, this is the podcast for you. Honestly, we went on into so many rabbit holes and tangents about where the world is growing, where the world is heading, and how and why you should be optimistic about being a creative leader and a design leader in this industry. So if you want to learn all about that stuff, listen to this one. And if you want to hear Leland's predictions, there are 3 and they are very good. Let's get into it. Why haven't we built a business model for design that captures its real value?
Oh my God, that is an hour and a half podcast at least, if not a full year class at a graduate school. God, how do I find my way into that? We haven't done it because there is a market mismatch in what is being sold and bought. One of the things that I love about the design industry, and I'm a designer, I'm a capital D designer. It burns through my blood. I see it as a philosophy, a way of being in life, not just a profession. So I say what I'm about to say with all sorts of love and identity with it. But the design industry sees itself as proselytizers of a philosophy. And when you go to design school, you are taught a worldview. You are taught a way to think. You are taught a moral role that you play in the world. You can see it in the Bauhaus. You can see it in School of Ulm. You could see it at the Institute of Design in Chicago, Black Mountain College. I mean, just the list goes on and on. And so when you go out into the world as a designer, you are proselytizing a belief system in the way the world should be. And that design can set it in that way. And what ends up happening is you sell a philosophy, you sell a belief in a discipline, because that's what you trained on, that's what you believe in. And you know its inherent goodness. The problem is nobody's buying that. The demand side of the market has dollars, it has problems, it has things it needs to do for its commercial endeavor. And it says, can you help me do that or not? And designers, meanwhile, oftentimes spend a lot of time talking about the value of design, why design matters. We want you to understand design thinking. And the demand side is like, yeah, but I got this business problem. Like, can you solve it or not? And that inherently is the crux of the problem. One side is selling philosophy. The other side is buying solutions. And they're sort of talking past each other. And when you start putting a dollar value to philosophy, it starts to feel gross. I don't do this for money. I do this because the world needs to be beautiful. I do this because I want to make great experiences and make the world a better place. I do this because I want to invent the future that we all want to live in. I love all of that. I believe in all of that. But no one buys that. That's designers talking to designers.
You kind of verge into, I love that quote that art is to no brief and craft is to a paid brief. And I think sometimes artists arrive in a commercial landscape like the design industry, and there's a lack of awareness of commercial capitalism, basically. And I think the conflation of those two worlds is where it gets really murky and confusing. And equally, it becomes the place where pricing is so random in a sort of time and materials based industry. And I feel like with the arrival of AI, it's only becoming more and more confusing. Where do you think we're landing here? Because I think my question around the business model heavily lands on pricing as a philosophy, as a practice. Where do you stand on that front?
On pricing? This is another big topic and a question. So pricing is not math. Pricing is not finance. Pricing is a creative act. It is a creative discipline. It works in numbers. It works in spreadsheets. It works in price points, but it is not a mathematics-related industry or discipline. Price is fundamentally the understanding of value and the exchange of value so that value can be captured. So there's value creation, value communication, value delivery, and value capture. Value creation is literally invention, entrepreneurship. Value communication is what a lot of creative industries have traditionally been tied to because of the nature of distribution and the nature of media. But it's ultimately communicating the value of something. Then there's value delivery, which is, does the product follow through on what it says it's going to do? Does it perform? And how do you get that value in people's hands so they can experience it as use value? And then there's value capture, which is the exchange for money or a valuable product turned into currency. So pricing, the discipline of it, is fundamentally about understanding that exchange. What are people selling? What are people buying? How do you assign a mechanic to that transaction? And then how do you discover what the appropriate price point is for that? Because we often are very familiar with the idea of the seller's profit. It costs me X amount of money. I need to sell it for Y amount of money so that I can have Z profit. And so naturally you want to lower the costs and increase the price that you can sell that to maximize your profit. Super simple. But there's also that on the buyer side. So the buyer has a buyer's profit. The buyer's profit begins with, how much does this cost me to buy? The price point that its product is sold at the market. How much am I willing to pay for it? That's called willingness to pay, or WTP. The difference between willingness to pay and cost to buy is the buyer's profit. And this is why if you ever talk to a client, the client is like, okay, well, what's the cost? And you're always taught, it's not a cost, it's an investment. Yes, but to them it is a cost because they have to measure that relative to the willingness to pay. So the willingness to pay is informed by a lot of things. And this is where pricing becomes really creative and not just math. Because price is not a fixed inherent number. You don't look at the production costs of something to distribution costs and say, oh, okay, well, the price has to be that. If you do, which a lot of agencies do, you do something called cost plus pricing. What's my cost plus the margin that I want to make on it? Usually it's 20%. That's cost plus pricing. It's a terrible way to price because you're focused on what you want to make, not what the buyer is willing to pay. So WTP is informed by lots of stuff. But ultimately, price is contextual, relational, and subjective. So all price is perceived price. Or I should say all value is perceived value. And willingness to pay is anchored on the perceived value of what you're going to buy. So what's the difference between stretching and yoga, for example? A heated room?
I guess
yeah.
There's no flow to...
Yeah, I mean, it's basically the same thing. It's a heated room, some more kind of like exotic language around it. Maybe some incense burning in the corner, but you're basically stretching. Fundamentally, it's the same thing, but yet people pay a ton of money to go to yoga. Well, why? Because the experience of it is different. The history that you're connected to is different. Stretching is just stretching. Stretching is technical, transactional, boring. But yoga, I got to start my day every day with yoga, and I'll pay $80 a session for it. And I'll have people lined up at the door. That's affecting willingness to pay. It's changing your subjective experience of it. Context means who is selling it to me? Where am I buying it? What does that say about what the product is? If you're being sold a diamond ring by some guy off the street, you're gonna be very skeptical of that diamond ring and the price versus if you go into Tiffany's and buy the exact same thing. That's contextual. Relational is what is the cost of this relative to things similar to it. So if I'm buying a white T-shirt, and at one store it has a T-shirt that is $5, $7, and then a shirt that's $1,000. That $1,000 is going to feel really weird. Like, why would I buy that? But if that $1,000 shirt is sitting next to a $900 shirt and a $20,000 shirt, just to come up with a very extreme example, that $1,000 shirt doesn't seem extreme. And there's all sorts of research that shows when you give people a set of options, they choose the middle one usually, and then after that, the most expensive one, and then least chosen is the cheapest one. That's because that set of options helps people understand what the price is. And if you change the context, you change the set of the price, you change the understanding of what something costs. And so this is why SaaS companies use tiered pricing. It's why grocery stores have multiple products on the shelf to teach you what stuff is priced and to push you towards the more expensive stuff. This is pricing. And design firms don't understand this. Creative agencies don't understand this. And so when you don't understand how to price the value of what you do, it's not just you lack the ability to communicate your value, though that is a real big issue because a lot of design firms want to talk about technical craft and beauty and things like that. That's not what people are buying. But the other side of it is you don't know how to price it. Even if you did, you don't know how to price it. So a lot of people default to charging hours or doing cost plus pricing, things that feel familiar, things that feel defensible. Well, I charge this many hours and my projections are just going to take me this long, or it cost me this much to do it and I have to make a profit, therefore I added 20% margin. But the buyer's like, I don't want you to take a long time to make this. So why are you selling me hours? Because that now we have a misalignment.
Yeah.
You want to take longer to do it. I want you to do it faster, but you're going to be incentivized to do it longer because you charge by the hour. And then cost plus pricing, respectfully, the buyer side is like, why is your profit my problem?
Yeah.
Like if you can't run your company profitably and you have all these inefficiencies in the way you deliver something so that your costs go higher, why is that my problem? My willingness to pay is here, but your cost plus what you want to make pushes it above my willingness to pay. Not my problem. You got to get better at running your business. And so this is why price is so vital in this conversation and so deeply under considered. And this is why our industry is having such a hard time economically.
Who has pricing nailed down? Because my mind's going in two different ways here, right? Firstly, I'm going to and I want to get onto the K-shaped economy thing in a moment, but I'm going to consumer and I'm going to perceive value in the power of brand and everything else on that side. Staying on topic, if I look at agencies and pricing, the agency movement that we're now seeing, if you are a branding agency, the temptation is to move into consultancy because you could argue consultancy had a better way of pricing what they did and therefore they're more profitable. I guess my original question is, one, which industry has pricing nailed down where that willingness to pay and there's less of a delta between all those things? And then my second question is, where do you go if you're an agency?
So pricing is not nailed down by a lot of people. It's absolutely still relatively an emerging practice. I'm really embedded in the pricing space, mainly because I love it. I see it as a new form of design. And so I'm just intellectually fascinated by it and love learning about it. And I know a lot of people practicing in the space and stuff. There are certain industries that are really good at it, like the airline industry, the hotel industry, extremely good at pricing and some of the most advanced pricing techniques out there. They're sort of like the frontier of pricing. And there's others. But there is no monolithic approach to pricing. Pricing is relative to the industry, the business model, the dynamics, and what the market is willing to pay. So there's just like there's no one way to build a brand, there's no one way to do pricing, which again makes it more of an art than a science. But to go to your question on the consultancy side, look, the consultancy side and the agency side are fundamentally different businesses, though they are superficially seen as the same. The superficial commonalities is it's really smart people who are highly skilled practitioners coming in to solve business problems. One does it through creativity, the other one does it through management advisory, though a lot of these consultancies have expanded beyond that. But when you really dig into it, it's apples and oranges. It's apples and car tires is how different it is. So management consultancies came up in an era when strategy was not a practice of companies. There was no need for strategy because you really basically built a factory, sold stuff out of that factory, and you tried to sell it to as many people as possible in the general population because you're trying to get as much yield from the capital you put in the ground as possible, because that was the game. But as companies expanded, as they diversified, as they became conglomerates, as markets started fragmenting, then strategy came in, and it's like, okay, we have to think more strategically about how we're deploying capital. Do we really need all these companies in our portfolio, or do we cut some? How do we reallocate capital so that it makes money? But it was all really part of a management efficiencies trend. And so you have management consultants who are really close to cost. And so when you can come in and say, I can cut $110 million from your business, and I can prove that I can do that, I want 10% of that. That is a very, very easy sale. And I know that because I have sold that. And I have, with 4 people, beaten 500-person companies with that exact proposition with 4 people. So this isn't theory. I have literally done this. I said, I will save you $40 million. You give me 10% of that. And I delivered $40 million in savings with a team of 4 other people. That is effectively the nugget of consulting. And they can prove it. And so they can do outcome-based delivery. They can put fees at risk because they are really close to what is being spent. And they can say, we took this out. Look, you're more efficient now. You saved all that. Creative agencies can't do that. Creative agencies, unless you are really close to the point of transaction, can't do outcome-based pricing. And by nature, creative agencies cannot say, well, this is a best practice in the industry, therefore do it here. Do the same thing on repeat, the way consultancies do, because creative agencies thrive on differentiation and being unique and doing something specific. So a lot of management consultancies can work with a lot of companies in the same industry because they claim industry expertise. The number of non-competes that agencies have is enormous because they compete on uniqueness and differentiation and creating a surprising edge over the competition. And companies don't want anyone else to know what the agency is brewing because the companies want to maintain an edge over their competition. So there's all these non-competes, right? So that's another difference. So it's hard to price something that is unproven, new, different, never done before. That's hard to price. And companies are inherently risk adverse. Companies like predictability, they like certainty, they like security, they like repeatability. That's what they pay for. A company will more likely pay more money for less stuff if it's certain than less money for more stuff if it's uncertain. And so the whole buyer dynamic is different. The whole value proposition is different. The way of working, where you work in the business is different. And so this idea that agencies can become consultancies is a real big uphill climb. That consultancies can become agencies is actually more feasible because you can add agencies in as an appendage, a downstream appendage to more corporate financial and strategy work.
For a lot of the agencies that have gone, right, we're traveling upstream, we're going to become more consultative. and you've seen many try and struggle. On the other side, you have seen Accenture, Deloitte Digital. I mean, Deloitte Digital, I believe, now closed down their agency proposition. I hear rumors that there have been a few consultancy agency problems because a lot of the time the brand that's working with the consultancy doesn't want the creative communications agency to know all their dirty laundry and therefore air that out in public. So I think the idea of bolting on the communications layer to the consultancy layer became quite troublesome and hard to sell in. Where do you go? The price, we've acknowledged that the price needs to change in how we're pricing within the industry of design creative. Where do you start? And if you were to predict what you think is going to happen, where do you think it's going to play out?
Great question. I think about this a lot because I'm still very bullish on creativity and design, but the idea of just looking at another industry and saying, we want some of that share, let's just go create a Me Too product and jump in that and think we're going to win, doesn't. The only source of value is the customer. So you have to start there. Now, there's lots of other questions that come with that, but fundamentally, principally, that's what it is. And so you have to look at what are the problems out there? How is the world changing at a macro level? What big shifts are happening in the world economically, socially, competitively, technologically, and how is that dislocating capital and putting that capital up for grabs because there's no one adequately serving that where that capital wants to go. And then you look at your company or a company you want to start and you say, what type of company do we have to be to compete for that dislocated capital? And then you say, okay, we have to be this kind of company, this category of company. Then you say, what's the premise of value creation? What is our proposition? What are we going to do to win that money? And then you say, what advantages do we have to have? Are we building? Do we need to build to structurally outcompete anyone else for that? That's like the consulting framework for figuring out what to do. But there are always big problems. There is always big shifts that are happening in the world. They're always underserved. And a big reason why, I'll just focus on agencies. The big reason why agencies struggle with this is because agencies always saw themselves as selling labor and capabilities. Technical labor on an hourly basis who could do these different capabilities, and which ones do you need to work on your business? I mean, at the heart of the business model, that's what it was. You can talk about outcomes. You can talk about great creativity. Blah, blah, blah. You are what you price. And if you price hours, you sell labor. And agencies effectively said, the proposition was, we went out and scoured the technical labor market. We found these people. We put them all under one roof. If you'd like to access them, pay us money. They're effectively a large-scale outsourced HR function for specialized labor. It's a terrible business model because clients don't need labor. They need solutions. They need outcomes. They need services. They need complexity resolved. And so what agencies are doing now, and still to this day are doing, is they just keep adding capabilities. And the most recent capability they're adding is AI that says, oh, we'll do the same thing we've always done, but we'll just do it faster now. And so agencies are not focusing on what clients really need. They're focusing on what they want to sell, what they have, what their processes are. And if you step back and you look at how the world is changing, you will see there are big shifts changing that are going to make creativity and design, for example, extremely valuable moving forward, but you have to be positioned for it. You can't just say, hey, I have really talented creative people and we call ourselves the creative company and you come to us for creativity and we believe in creativity. Like, nobody's buying creativity. Creativity is a characteristic of a deliverable, not the deliverable.
I look at Michael Farmer, Caroline Johnson, a lot of these humans out there that are kind of waving the flag of this topic, right? We're talking about outcome-based pricing, and this is one of the big reasons why I wanted to have a conversation with you on this show, because the journey to getting to that place takes so much strategic thought, reasoning, but also accepting what you aren't and are going to do as you go forward. What do you think is the biggest sacrifice an agency would have to make if they are to survive it to the next decade of being a thriving business?
Specialization.
Carry on.
So specialization is hard because it says you have to say no to a lot of stuff so that you can focus on one thing. You can price time, deliverables, solutions, workflows, outcomes. That's it. And you have to understand what you're selling. Am I selling time? Am I selling a deliverable like a logo, an ad campaign, whatever? Am I selling solutions, which are complex, a program of complex solutions to solve complex problems? Am I selling a workflow? Meaning, are people outsourcing something they used to do internally to me? So that's what managed services is, or business process outsourcing. And that was a huge thing that's driven the scale of the consultancies. Am I selling outcomes? Meaning I'll deliver this to you, and if I do, you give me this. That's what performance marketing is. That's what efficiency consulting is all about with a management consultant. I'll cut these costs. You give me a small bounty for what I find to cut. So you have to understand how close you are. For instance, not every creative agency is going to be able to do outcome-based pricing. As lovely as that is, and I would love outcome-based pricing, it is extremely hard to justify outcome-based pricing unless you are at the moment of transaction or at the moment of spending cuts. Because you have to prove, I took this, a consequential action led to this outcome. Lots of times, creative agencies put things into the world, and we play a longer-term game, in the example of like building brand equity. In that period of time, as you waited for brand equity and preference in the market to shift towards a brand, the company has increased distribution. They changed their pricing. They increased their sales team. There was a change in the marketplace. A war happened.
So much macro stuff happening.
How do you remove all those exogenous variables to say that what you did led to that? It's a really impossible conversation to have. So outcome-based pricing is not possible, except if you're in like performance marketing and you can show through the tech that something happened. And, you know, that's why everyone moved towards performance-based marketing, because you could guarantee me this. Yeah. Cool, I'll give you the money. Again, certainty, low perceived risk, creates a higher willingness to pay. Like, where is all this going? Like, the reality is that we need to step back and look at the economy. Whether or not people believe it or not, the reality is that the creative industry participates in the facilitation of commercial activity. Otherwise, we're just creating art. And in many ways, the art world has been financialized too. So, you know, that's kind of undercuts my argument a bit. But the creative agencies facilitate economic activity. They facilitate the growth and the profitability of companies and the acquisition of things that people value, want, and desire on the demand side. So you have to understand what we do and the business value of it in the context of that. So either you make something more efficient, more valuable, or grow in scale. Revenue, profit, price. And they're all kind of like interrelated with each other. So the thing that I'm really passionate about and really believe in and have written about is the K-shaped economy. The K-shaped economy has been happening since the 90s in the US, and I'm pretty positive it's happening elsewhere in the world. But it's a bifurcation of the economy that really came to the foreground during COVID and accelerated, where the middle of economies globally is hollowing out. And that's driven by a lot of different things, everything from technology to policy to, you know, wealth distribution, where capital assets are held and how wealth is being created and so on. But regardless of the reasons for it, the outcome and the ongoing trend is a K-shaped economy and an increasing economy. As of right now, the top 10% of the U.S. economy, because that's the one that I know the best, drives 50% of all consumer spending. That is an enormous number. And the reality is that will affect how budgets are spent by companies. And so do you evolve to better appeal to the top of the K curve, where most of the spending is aggregating, or to the bottom of the K curve? And both are perfectly good strategies, but you can't sit in the middle, because the way that the market is bifurcating, either people want the lowest cost option in the market, which is why you see a rise of dollar stores in the US, or they want something that has more value beyond functional or economic value, that it has aesthetic value, it has social value, it has cultural capital value, it has emotional value, it's differentiated in some way. That's what the top of the K curve seeks. And both the top and bottom of the K curve have completely different competitive dynamics to it. But what's going to happen is you cannot be a company in the middle with a decent product at a decent price, because that appeals to nobody in the K curve. And that's why you see things like Bed Bath & Beyond collapse or Macy's struggle and all these companies that built giant multi-billion-dollar brands when the middle market was huge. And you see it with big box retail stores. Big box retail stores used to dominate, but now they're being, they're having share chipped away by specialization. Specialized retailers who are offering better products, better experiences, and people are willing to pay either a premium for that or be more loyal to that. Even though the specialized retailers might not be the most expensive, they are ones that are preferred. Therefore, those companies can discount less and have better revenue quality, which is also a part of competing at the top. You want better revenue quality at the top, where at the bottom of the K curve, companies need scale because they're competing on penny profits. And they need to sell to as many people as possible. And so the creative and design industries are going to be much more valuable to companies competing at the top of the K curve than at the bottom of the K curve.
How many, does that mean that we're going to see fewer brands? Or does that mean that we're just going to see brands re-strategize and head to either one of the Ks or end of the K?
It'll be the latter. So you'll see less brands at the bottom of the K curve and you'll see more at the top. Less brands at the bottom of the K curve is because building the manufacturing and distribution infrastructure to sell huge volumes at low price is really expensive. It costs a lot of money to sell a cheap product. And it takes, and even if you got a huge injection of capital, you couldn't build it overnight. It takes decades to build this stuff. I remember being in a negotiation with Pepsi, with a company that I used to work at, where we were talking to them about distributing a product that we made. And Pepsi was extremely proud of the North American rails that it had built, that it could ship a Pepsi product to any food retailer, I think like within a couple days. Might have even been faster than that, but they were extremely proud of that. And so the whole idea was, well, hey, we would just pay Pepsi a toll to put our product on their rails, and they would ship it wherever we wanted because it cost them nothing. They had already built the infrastructure. They could just throw it on the back of the truck that was already going in that direction to deliver Pepsi products. So what you're going to see, and this is totally played out in the food industry, is these large-scale companies at the bottom have massive portfolios where they strip out all the operations from those portfolios, keep only the brand, clean up the product ingredients to make it even cheaper, throw it on the rails of the distribution and manufacturing distribution that they've already created, and then push it broad for scale. And so like Grunes was recently bought by Unilever or something. Yeah. Grunes is not a big company. I think they were maybe like 200 million in revenue or whatever, but it didn't matter. They had a good brand. They had a passionate fan base. And so the holding company of food companies basically said, hey, cool, you got a cool brand. We know there's a market for it. Cool. We'll buy it. We'll own it. We'll throw it on our rails, capture all the profit from it, and we'll scale it. That's the value we'll add. We'll scale it. And so from that sense, a lot of brands will be bought by these large-scale distributors at the bottom of the K curve because that's how they make their money, continuing to monetize through different brands that they own, large-scale distribution. But it all goes back to the same strategy of just how do we sell it at the cheapest cost and scale it as much as possible. Whereas, to close the thought, at the top of the K curve, there will be a lot of brands, a lot of competition. The waters will be chummy and red up there because price doesn't matter up there because people have much more discretionary income. Product functionality won't matter as much because product functionality and product quality are just a cost of entry up there. They're not a point of differentiation. And even if it is, it's going to be a limited point of differentiation with how quickly things can be copied. And so now you have to invent and create and imagine things beyond price and quality and functionality. What is the social value? What is the cultural capital? How beautiful is it? How distinct and differentiated is it in the market? These are all the questions that have to be solved to make the product more differentiated, more desirable, drive a higher willingness to pay, drive preference in a highly competitive market, and make the company and the product more valuable in the eyes of the buyer and investors. And that is what creative, broadly, design is incredibly good at.
Yeah.
But we've never articulated it that way. We help companies become more valuable. We help products become more valuable in perception and reality because we layer new types of value onto it. And historically, we've always seen it as, well, we need to communicate. Sure, yes. But when you look at the top of the K curve, communication is not the problem, particularly with everything going towards social and influencers. Like, they'll do the communication. Influencers are basically their own ad agencies now. Now the question is, how do you make the product more valuable? How do you make the company more valuable so that there's a higher willingness to pay, a stronger preference, so the companies become less dependent on discounting? And competitively, it's harder for other companies to copy the intangible value that has been built on top of the product. Like, everyone loves to talk about Liquid Death.
Yeah.
Who's going to copy Liquid Death's social capital, its cultural capital, its brand? It's really hard to do that. And so that starts to become a competitive moat because it's hard to copy. I can't just go to a factory and say, hey, I want you to produce me the Liquid Death brand for my new brand. But I can say, hey, I want you to go, like, I can go to a factory and say, hey, reproduce me this, clothing line that Gucci just did, and I'm going to sell it under this brand at a much, much cheaper price. You can totally do that.
By the way, you've articulated that so well. My ape brain fully understands this. My commercial brain is now going, okay, so we're establishing the importance of brand. Brand is going to be highly important, particularly with the rise of AI, and duplication is going to flood the market, and we're going to see same shit rolled out left, right, and center. So the value of what a branding, design, transformation, value creation agency does is going to, the demand of that is going to increase. So the winners from this K-shaped economy and the rise of AI slop will be branding, design agencies and value creation businesses. Who are the losers?
It's so funny. I've been so focused on who the winners are that sometimes it's hard to think about exactly who the losers, because I just like, oh, well, they'll be losers. I don't really define them. People who continue to sell time, people who continue to think that the problem to be solved is communication, image issues, people who, and I guess I'm really just thinking in the agency context, people who continue to promote craft as a point of differentiation. AI is eating everything from the bottom up, and it's eating craft. Craft is very much confused with polish right now. And polish is easily done by tech. Craft and polish are not the same thing. Craft is how well something is made for the purpose in which it is used. And does it hold up through use, and is it useful? Not is it technically beautiful, is it technically elegant, and things like that. Something can be like beautiful, but just completely fall apart in use. And then it's not well crafted because it wasn't fit for purpose.
I've never heard someone put it like that. It's so funny because you hear people defending craft, but they're absolutely conflating that with polish, or confusing craft as polish. Because the value of good branding and good design or advertising was the literal craft and the beautification of a thing versus its value in itself and how it has been built and pulled together, which could have been from an incredible data insight about the macroeconomics of the market that brand exists in. There's craft in discovering that.
It has its look. I'm a big John Ruskin fan. For anyone out there, I can go on a long time about how design comes from John Ruskin and how the whole idea of design as an act of value creation comes from John Ruskin. It's very easy to connect that. Similarly, Buckminster Fuller. I think a lot of design kind of breaks down into two camps, and like the Johann Itten camp and the Buckminster Fuller camp. The Johann Itten camp is all about like semiotics and aesthetic and color and theory, and like I have huge love for that because I think it has so much value. Then there's the Buckminster Fuller side, which is brings in a much more practical side. And a lot of people fall on that. A lot of product designers fall on the Buckminster Fuller side. Industrial designers fall on the Buckminster Fuller side, which is if I focus on designing the thing perfectly for what it is meant to do, by default, it will become beautiful. And that's where my point of view on craft is. Being fit for purpose, it will result in it being well crafted, as opposed to craft being an aesthetic that I have to force on a surface or a substance and say it must look like this because this is what the principles of aesthetics say.
Yeah.
That's polish. Craft includes how well something is made and so that it is fit for purpose.
Do you think, just comparing those two, I almost like listening to you speaking. Obviously, you weren't born this way. You must have been, very smart at school, and you probably had this fighting polymath in your brain because when I speak to you, I feel like maybe young Leland was further over on the other side about beautification. And when did you flip? Because I feel like nobody goes and gets into this world. Again, you've said things like you've been a designer cosplaying as a CEO and things like that, which I find hilarious. But when did that flip? Was there a moment in your mind where you flipped from being beautification and aesthetics and design into the commerciality and the kind of principles more bordering into the kind of product designy thing? When did that change? Or did it ever change? Were you always like this?
So oftentimes the phenomena exists before the language exists to describe it. So for me, the phenomenon was I grew up being a fine artist. From my earliest memories, I was drawing and painting. I was in school, in a public school, and I remember that this was like first grade. The school pulled me out of the class, hired an art teacher, and I had one-on-one art classes with a teacher in elementary school. I remember winning all these art competitions and stuff. My parents even wanted me to go to fine art school, which nobody's parents do. They were like, we will pay for you to go to fine art school. You have to do this. And it's like everyone in my life was encouraging me to become an artist. The problem with it for me was I grew up in a small southern town. So I had no narrative of what being an artist meant other than starving artist who made pretty pictures for rich people to buy. And the idea of just making aesthetically pretty things for wealthy people was really unmotivating. And I don't know, I've always been really strategic. I've always been fascinated by the underlying mechanics of how things work and stuff. And it's not that like art and that interest are incompatible. They absolutely are. And there's incredible artists who've brought those two worlds together. But I had no one teaching me this stuff or exposing me to this stuff. So long story short, I ended up kind of getting exposed to advertising. And I mean, this was in the 90s. And advertising was much different and more at its apex industry then. And I was just like, wow, this would be amazing. I can be an artist. People can see my work. I can be paid for it. I can make a really good living from it. This is great. I went hardcore into advertising. Went to college for it at the University of North Carolina, studied it. It just interned in it. Anyway, fast forward, kind of grew disillusioned with the advertising industry in a very short order, in about like 2 or 3 years, and just feeling kind of lost. I just was like, I don't know. I don't know what to do other than read. So I just read and read and read everything. I read architecture. I read history books. I read economics books. I mean, I read complexity science books. I just read everything. And in the course of reading, I started to realize what design was. Because I had been exposed to graphic design in high school, but I was exposed to it in my art classes as graphic design is graphic arts. It is art in the reduction of form, which basically left it at an aesthetic practice, which again was just like, okay, it's art, but with graphics. And again, beautiful, beautiful work done in that space, but it never satisfied that other side of me. It was still just the art side. So jumping back to the period when I was reading a lot, I realized the difference between lowercase d design and capital D design. Lowercase d design is a profession. Industrial design, graphic design, so on, information design. Capital D design is a philosophy. It is a human endeavor. We are all designers. We design, all of us design always, and some of us design well. So the way that I came to understand it was design is a third pillar of human inquiry along the sciences and the humanities. So the sciences ask the question, what is fact? And it creates all these disciplines to pursue that question: physics, biology, chemistry, whatnot. Then the humanities asks, what matters as a people, as a community, as a society? What matters to us? And so it creates all these disciplines: art, poetry, literature, law, to figure this stuff out. And then you have the designs, which asks, what is desirable? It tries to figure out, where do we want to go? And then its follow-up question is, how do we get there? And that's what design disciplines fundamentally pursue. And this is why designers see it as a philosophy and not just a profession, a life calling. This is why the design schools teach it this way. Rightfully so. It is. It is a third pillar of human inquiry. You go to school to learn science, and the science has a very strong ethical position on what it is, a scientific method, a moral role that it plays in society. The humanities do too. You can look at art, you can look at literature, you can look at law. It all feels that same way. So it's only natural that the designs, not design, the designs do too. Ethical, principled role in society. And so designers go into the world, learn that in school, and then go into the world practicing that. And so because design is such a technical endeavor historically, the technical aspects have been confused with the philosophical aspects and vice versa. And so when you get into the commercial practice of design, designers think they're selling either technical skill or philosophy of design, the belief of design. There was this old phrase. I don't remember who ever told it to me, and maybe I just made it up along the way to kind of summarize this, but it was really kind of contrasting people in advertising people versus people in design. So designers are missionaries and advertisers are mercenaries, because advertising doesn't come from a principled worldview. It has always been a profession. It has always been a business. Design comes from a principled, ethics-based worldview and purpose in the world. Our job is to set the world right. Our job is to organize the world into a better place. That's why the Bauhaus came about. That's why the School of Ulm came about. That's what drove Buckminster Fuller to do what he did. I mean, on and on and on. So this is a very long way for me to answer your question, but once I understood that, all of a sudden I realized I'm a designer. I'm not an artist. I draw on art and I'm inspired by art, but I'm also not a business strategist, but I draw on that and I pull on that. Yeah. And that is the fundamental truth of design. Design is integrative. Design pulls together all sorts of things to figure out where we want to go and how we get there, because it wants to answer the question of what do we desire. And so once I understood that, I gave myself free permission to just pursue whatever I wanted to pursue, because I'm a designer. I'm a capital D designer, and that's why I cosplay as a CEO. Because I'm still doing design. I'm just doing it in the role of a CEO. My materials are different now. My field of play, my canvas is different now, but design principles are all the same. And by the way, there's a whole thing called a design method, and it did not come from IDEO. So there is a way of doing design that lots of times has nothing to do with aesthetics. And this is the important part. Aesthetics are the lingua franca of design, because the only way that you can get people to understand a future that is desirable is to literally show them what it could look like. Seeing is believing. And so we use aesthetics as a way to bring together a lot of complex information into an elegant to understand package. Seeing is believing, and that's why design practices in the visual field predominantly.
I'm so glad I asked that question. I was not expecting it to go that direction. And we are borderline me not feeling intelligent enough to have a follow-up question here. So I want to move into the prediction. And you promised me that you came along with 3, but now I feel like we've dived into such a deep level of conversation that I wonder if your 3 has remained the same.
Prediction 1, agencies will become managed services businesses. They will sell workflows, not time, not deliverables, usually not solutions, usually not outcomes. Predominantly, they will sell workflow ownership with service level agreements to them, because they will evolve into software businesses with a service front end. But fundamentally, the model, the profit, the price point will be attached to workflows that are outsourced to them.
I want to expand on that, but we can't. That is a very good prediction. Okay, thank you. Prediction number 2.
The world of finance and design will become bedfellows.
I like this one.
There is far too much money floating around in the global economy with few companies to put it in. The traditional forms of increasing the value of a company among private equity firms or VC firms is running out of steam. There's only so much you can eke out from efficiencies. And seeking higher multiples, seeking better performance is going to require something other than financial engineering. And design, not creativity, but design is the best way to increase the value of something, not just financially, but emotionally, socially, culturally. And the world of finance will understand that and bring design in closer to itself.
Okay. Prediction number 3.
Prediction number 3 is that, I guess I'll just talk from my book, pricing will become a much bigger topic for companies.
And this is across the board, like broadly.
Across the board. I think pricing is a growth industry.
Why has it not been before?
There are 4 ways that you can increase net revenue. 1, sell more, convert variable costs to fixed costs, cut costs, increase price. The easiest one, cut costs. The most expensive one, sell more. The most confusing one to do, convert variable cost to fixed costs. The hardest one to do, price. And the most overlooked one is price. However, price is the one that drops significantly more value, drops significantly more to net profit than any of the others. A.T. Kearney studies, McKinsey studies, BCG studies all show the exact same thing in the same proportions. The best way to increase net profit is through increasing price. But price is the scariest one to do because you always think it's going to turn off demand. You always think it's going to piss off your retailers, and you don't really know how to increase it. But it is the one that has the biggest and most immediate impact to the business.
I can't wait for 10 years' time to listen back to this. I'd love to know what mechanisms and things, because we just heard about a supermarket in the UK is introducing dynamic pricing, live pricing in a supermarket, which is maybe the first iteration of this pricing world that we're diving into. Can you believe that, by the way? Like if limes are suddenly hot, they're going to go up value. Like what?
Oh yeah, no, it's happening. The Uberization of pricing in the U.S. has also been happening. There's different people who are doing it. There's even a lot of legal a debate among policymakers over whether it's legal or not. And so there's probably going to be some laws passed in the U.S. about it. But dynamic pricing is just a tactic.
It's one of the ideas.
It is one of like hundreds of different things that you can do.
I love it. We could this. I know you've got to go. This could have been a huge expansion conversation. We might need a part 2 on this one. Lee, I just want to say this has been genuinely fascinating and incredible. You've gone way above what I was expecting, which was already quite high. So thank you so much. You've been excellent and awesome to talk to, and I can't wait to put this out into the world. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. It was a lot of fun.